welcome to the Entrepreneur's Journey, the podcast where we talk with business owners and entrepreneurs about the real story of how they got to where they are, what they've learned along the way, and what they might do differently if they had the chance to do it all over again. I'm your host, Peter Santry, and today I'm joined with Tom Casey, the founder of Old Sod Travel, a company devoted to curating extraordinary journeys that bring wonder, joy, and relaxation to every moment of the trip. After a successful career in financial services, Tom made a bold pivot, leaving behind a profession to build a business that aligns with his passions and fit his changed later in life lifestyle. We'll talk about that transition, how he went from a large corporation to become an entrepreneur, and how he scaled through the challenges of a global pandemic, and what's next for Old Sod Travel. So welcome, Tom.
Well, thank you, Peter. Good to be here.
Great. So let's dive into it. I think there's so much going on here, because there you were probably 10, 12 years ago with a nice book of business in the financial service industry, insurance, clients like that. And, next thing you know, you're sort of leaving the profession you've been in for, well, we won't count the years, but a lot of them. And then you say, well, I'm gonna dabble in the travel business because it's more aligning with what I'm thinking about. And I just want to, can you take us through the process of that pivot and tacking away to a totally different business, which you probably knew very little about, I'm assuming.
Well, yeah, to say I knew little about it would be to exaggerate how much I did know about it. I really didn't know anything, but I did know that I wanted to be kind of off on my own. I actually, in college, took a winter study course called Starting Your Own Business.
Ah,
So I guess my interest in kind of being my own boss has been out there for a long time. Uh, but graduating from college, kind of knowing the type of life I wanted and financially the types of expectations I had, financial services business was going to provide a lot more income, a lot more quickly, be able to allow me to start a family, which was not something that's very possible when you have a young family. Although I did tempt fate by starting another business. After about 15 years in the insurance business, I convinced my wife that I could start a business in the software field,
mhm.
and got together with some other graduates from the same school, including my old boss. And we started a software company that was going to help employers manage employee data. This is data that's reported to pension companies and insurance companies and payroll companies, and it's all redundant data, and it's all different parts of the same employee information. We started it with the idea of it being a software product, and before we knew it, the internet came along. And the data that we were assembling had to be transmitted to people, and we hadn't really figured that part out. And the internet came along, and it was slow and blocky, and there were issues with it. But eventually, that's what the path of the company followed. The After about 2 years, though, we didn't really have the funding to pay a lot of salaries, and I was after 2 years of no income to speak of. I needed a salary, so went back to work in the insurance industry, but that was always in the back of my mind, starting my own business.
Mhm.
And that no doubt fed to my decision in I guess it was about 2010, to start Old Sod Travel. So as you said, it did kind of combine my interest. At that point in my life, I was kind of bored with just the intellectual part of being in the financial services business, and I wanted to try something else. And we were at a point where we didn't have all the college paid for, but it was all in the bank. So we knew we could get through that big important part of our lives, and so went off on my own and started Old Side Travel.
So Tom, was there a process where you said, I'm going to look at, you know, four industries that I think are going to be, growing, or how'd you land on travel? I mean, let's face it, the internet, you raised it earlier, has disintermediated the travel business dramatically over, the life of the internet.
Yeah.
Why did you land on travel of all the choices or options, or was that just a passion that you just wanted to pursue regardless?
No, I actually hadn't thought about it at all. I had thought a little bit about starting my own business, but I had a daughter who was doing a semester abroad in Galway, and I went and visited her and played some golf, drank a few Guinness, really relaxed for the first time in 30 years. And I realized that two things. One, this could be a way to make a living. You know, putting together really special trips to Ireland. But secondly, the travel, I mean, it was stuff that I wanted to do. Playing golf in Ireland was pretty fun.
Mhm.
Traveling around Ireland was pretty fun, and I just felt like there was an opportunity to introduce people to something they would not be able to easily find on their own. And it just kind of became a thing for me, and I pursued it for a couple of years while keeping the day job before in 2014 cutting the strings and doing it full time.
So it sounds like you started to envision a lifestyle for yourself that you could attach a business to. Is that correct? And that trip kind of crystallized the thinking to say, I want to start this business. And then you obviously must have seen that there was a need. Was there any, did you go back and say, okay, did you look at the demographics and say, you know, there's going to be a baby boom sort of generation that's going to want to travel more? Was that part of your thinking, or was it just, hey, this is what I want to do, so maybe there's other people like me that want to do it?
Yeah, I'd say it's closer to the second point you made there, because I started to talk to people about it, and a lot of people said, "Geez, I'd like to do that. I'd love to go to Ireland, but I don't know where to start." And as we talked about, it's not that hard to start your own research on a trip. What is hard, though, is the confidence to know that you're making good decisions. And for a lot of people, these are very big deal trips. Our average trip is about $20,000. That's not a drop in the bucket for anyone. And so the importance of it kind of goes way up, and the concern about making mistakes. Another thing I was thinking about, kind of in getting ready or thinking about this conversation, was that a lot of people going overseas, even if it's to a pretty gentle place like Ireland or the rest of Europe, there's a little bit of hesitation, no matter how often you've traveled, because there are a thousand things that could go wrong, and you don't know where you are, you don't know the customs over there, you don't know if your driver doesn't show up and you're some remote part of Ireland, what do you do? And what we have kind of found that by just giving people that sense of comfort, it makes it a lot more approachable to look at going abroad and knowing that if something gets screwed up, not necessarily because of what we did, although it could be, but if they have a problem, it's going to get solved, and that's become a bigger and bigger part of what we our product and what we deliver.
So being a guide, which is sort of like you've curated the locations, which lessens the chance that the experience isn't going to be good, and
Yeah.
then providing the comfort that the resources are there, should anything screw up, and doing that research gives a lot of people comfort that they can go. And tell me about the demographic that you were looking at that point. Obviously we know sort of how you arrived at it. Was that your thought of who you were going to market to at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that at the point in time that I was leaving my paying job for a non-paying job that I really had been able to identify and articulate that specific of a goal. But as I talked to more people and talked to what was motivating them to take the trip, I realized that there were a lot of people who had worked their whole lives to get to the point where they could take these trips and spend a little time with their spouse or their family. And a big part of what we do are multi-generational trips. I've brought my family over a couple times, and it's kind of special time. When you're on one of these trips for 7 days or 10 days, in my case, my adult kids, the only thing there is to do is talk to me and my wife. Yeah, they're stuck. But we end up having great, very memorable times. And so, we're lucky to be able to do that. But our demographic's probably between age 55 or 60 and 80. And, especially the closer people get to 80, that comfort is all the more important,
Yeah,
because I've had a couple of clients have medical issues when they're traveling. And, to have a medical problem in a rural part of Ireland is kind of intimidating. You don't know where to start. So we don't know that much either, but, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. We know how to
mhm,
get started and get them headed towards the hospital and finding a doctor and whatnot. We've got about 4 or 5 people who live in Ireland, so obviously they're going to be familiar with that process. So that just, I think, all kind of leads into the comfort that we
right,
offer.
right. And one of the things that I notice, and as we all age a little bit, is your values and what's important to you changes. And what you're doing is, a much more experience economy thing, less about making money, more about living and getting experiences. And
Yep.
it's interesting, the demographic you cite is the person who's paying for it, but as you said,
Yep.
the people who go on the trip is multi-generational. People are bringing kids too, and maybe adult age kids who can enjoy the golf and maybe a Guinness or two as well. So that sounds really interesting. So let's tack away and say, all right, you've made the choice, you talk to people, it seems like light bulbs are going off everywhere, you're seeing a need and you're going with it, you've departed from your day job. So tell me what it was like, or the learning curve to go from obviously a very set up financial services company where your systems are set up and you just really have to do the front office part of it, to starting your own business. And how was that transition, and were you prepared for it given your background?
I wasn't prepared for it, frankly. I think I spent about 2 years just working with friends and family on trips, and really not charging them much for it. I just wanted to kind of experience it and figure things out. But as I went through that process, still working full time during the day, I started to realize that I needed to put together an accounting system, a way to account for it. And as I later found out, when I worked for a while with a partner who you knew, Bill Halen, he was a very successful entrepreneur, but the finances of a travel company, in his mind, were kind of unique, and kind of I had to figure it out from. I thought that all the businesses had this kind of challenge, but people are giving you a deposit now for a trip a year from now, and you've got to price a trip a year from now that is, within certain. We have certain parameters, but basically, it's going to be the same price that you're giving them now. So, and you might not, you don't get the money for the balance of the trip until a couple months before they travel. It's just a lot of somewhat unique things that make the financing and keeping track of your cash flow very challenging. Fortunately, I was able to learn a lot about that from him.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, so as I went through probably the first 2 years, I was still on my own, and I getting busier and busier in 2014 or 2016, and I realized that I have to hire people. I didn't want to hire people. I thought I was just going to do this by myself, but it was gathering such momentum that ended up hiring several people around 16 and 17. And what was really stood out to me at the time is the quality of the people that I was getting. It just happened to kind of stumble into a group of people that was a perfect fit for what we did. And that was, they were people who had had successful business careers before, but ended up staying at home for 10, 12, 14 years with kids, and were anxious to get into the workforce. But at that point in their lives, they didn't want to, and couldn't work full time. We wanted people who were part-time, who were flexible. And, I'd love to tell you that I had the foresight to figure that out or observe that and head in that direction, but it just really increased the quality of the people we were able to attract, and the experience that we're able to offer to our people.
They've gotten their kids through college. They're doing it because they like it and they want the intellectual curiosity. They're only going to be working part-time hours. Probably, you don't have to pay the benefits, and maybe I don't know, but they're 1099s or maybe they're W-2s, but part-time. So it's a very flexible and affordable labor force, which probably was a bonus.
Yeah, and it was a bonus. I mean, again, I didn't really start out heading down that path. It's just when you're desperate to find people in a pretty vibrant economy, you take what you can get. And next thing I knew, it's like this working out pretty well for us. So, and it's
Right.
working out well for them. One of the things that we do a lot of is they get to travel a lot. So they get to go see the destinations that they're selling. And it's not, a lot of them know each other before they came to work here. So it's fun for them to get off for 4 or 5 days away from the kids and drink a little wine and kind of see the sights and experience what their clients do. And so that part of it works out real well too. And we can do it fairly cost efficiently because of our relationships over there. And so it's a win-win for them, our partners, and for our people.
And what I find interesting is that, your prior business experience had all been in the United States, yet a lot of your employees are overseas, like in Ireland and other places. How did you make the linkage, or how did you attract the people from Ireland? What was did you have pre-existing relationships, or how did that all come together?
Well, one of the first people I hired was previously senior vice president of human resources for Marsh & McLennan in Dublin. Now,
Uh,
I could have spent years looking for that resume, and it just fell into my lap. And she she's a partner in the business and just an incredibly efficient and effective business person, and is very knowledgeable, obviously, in a part of the business that didn't really know, HR.
right,
So working together, we've been able to put together a really great group of people, and I talk about how efficient she is. On a Tuesday, we'll be just having a casual conversation. I'll say, I think we're going to need 2 or 3 people to be able to do this. And the following Monday, I'll be talking to her and ask her if she had any leads, and she said, "Well, we've got 3 people starting next week, and I've got a fourth that I think we can hire."
wow,
I don't know where they come from, but they all they all seem upright and good, solid citizens, and it's worked out. But she's a very effective business person for a company that's growing as quickly as we did. That's real important to be able for her to be able to
right.
keep up.
Right, right. So obviously the concept's very attractive to a certain demographic, like you said, that sort of post corporate person who's got plenty in the tank and wants to travel, and I get that. So now you've got to build, a culture and everything else, and sort of to galvanize more people and attract more people to it. How did you, go about doing that basic blocking and tackling of setting up and building a culture and a vision and all that? Was that, I mean, the hiring sounded serendipitous, but I know there's work here that follows that.
Yeah, initially, when I started the company, I was living in the Annapolis area down in Maryland, and most of the people that we hired initially came from that area. And we made a point of getting together weekly. Just we'd go into a room, a conference room, and just work and have other people to talk to about trying to find a hotel here or a problem you're having with the driver there. So kind of built a little camaraderie there. Then I moved to Hingham, which is outside of Boston, and we've kind of done something similar to that. And they get together once a week, again for the same purposes, and that kind of gives them the opportunity to talk about the problems that they have and how people respond to them. And a lot of times as we grow, in particular, you just have more people traveling, so you have more problems with things. Again, not necessarily our fault, but just things happen when you travel.
Right,
So that's been an important part. You know, I haven't met all the people that we will work for us in Europe, and that's part of the reason for being over here. We're going to have our first meeting in a couple of weeks here, and I'll be able to get to meet these people firsthand. I'll have a couple of people come over from the States, but being able to do meetings over in person is obviously preferable to what we're doing right now over Zoom. But the Zoom meetings, we do have those in addition once a week. And again, to just get used to seeing the faces and hearing the issues. And
right,
a lot of times we're not talking about anything important, but it's important that we talk.
right. Yeah, the meeting structures and a regular cadence allows that communication to happen, and everybody's working well together. So let's fast forward a little bit. We're in the travel business and the pandemic hits, and
Yep.
you're sailing along and travel stops. How did you marshal the resources? What happened at that moment?
Well, actually, one thing I'll just add there that just to make it even more disastrous was we bought a company 6 months before the pandemic started.
Ah,
So we bought a company that was a specialist in Scandinavia to meet up with our British Isles company and kind of do the same thing. We thought we'd get a little bit of referral back and forth, which we have. But at that point, we had all the cold, wet places in Europe kind of nailed down. Um, but in terms of the pandemic, I remember it vividly because I was traveling. My wife is a college counselor, and we were traveling in North Carolina seeing friends, and she was going to see a couple of colleges down there. I was flying back to Maryland at the time. And I remember it had just started. It was March of 2020. It just started to hear about it. And I'm in the airport and seeing not a high percentage, but maybe 7, 8% of the people wearing masks. And I just remember walking through the airport and just each time I would see a mask, I'd get further down the path of what does this mean? And I called my partner that afternoon and said, this is going to be a problem. This is going to snowball. And she said, well, what do we do? My obvious answer was, I have no idea. But the business did go to zero. Nobody was traveling. The only reason we were doing anything is we had booked a bunch of people before the pandemic started, and they wanted to be rebooked because everyone knew that the panic was going to just, die down after a while, and the pandemic was going to die down. And so we spent a lot of time rebooking trips. And you talk about a depressing thing to do. You've already done all the work for this, and now you're redoing it and redoing it, every 3 or 4 months. But fortunately, the pandemic did come with some government assistance. We were able to take out a loan. We didn't use up all the loan, but we did use up a good portion of it, and thank God for that. I don't know what we would have done without it. But and the workforce, because it was so flexible, we were able to downsize pretty relatively easy compared to what other people were dealing with. But then coming out of the pandemic, there were a lot of fits and starts, and people thought they could travel and they couldn't. But my wife and I ended up having a incredible trip in November of 2021 to Italy. We were in St. Peter's Basilica taking pictures, and there was no one in the pictures. I mean, there was just nobody there,
yeah,
and it was
you
kind of
could
a
have done you could have
spooky.
done it for an art book,
Yeah,
an architecture
yeah.
book. Yeah,
It was a strange time to travel, but eventually it started coming back, and 2023 was a great year for us, and 2024 was even better. And so that was a lot. The growth was from an artificially low number up to a pretty good number.
right.
Um, but
There was that pent up demand of people wanting to do these travel, and so you were just having to book them and then book them again and book them again until finally the all clear went up and everybody said I'm going to go regardless and can't
yeah.
postpone my life forever. Um, okay, so let's focus maybe on stuff you don't want to talk about, which is the mistakes you made and lessons learned. So tell us about some of the things that you would have done differently or faults or things that people should look out for as they're going on the same journey that you're on.
I probably would have not waited so long to hire people. Um, I my initial ambitions were a lot smaller than what they've turned out to be, and I was trying to keep things, within reason. And I was running on a shoestring budget. There was no outside financing. I didn't even put any money in the company except for a little sweat equity. So and the significance of that was I think we would have ended up going much faster, much farther. had I taken advantage of the opportunity we had to grow in those early years. Also, I was just afraid to get too far out of over my skis, which I think is pretty common I suspect is pretty common for entrepreneurs. But just trying to be a good manager, financial manager, I guess.
Good steward of capital. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's right. Okay. So let's fast forward from the pandemic to today. And it sounds like you covered the wet areas of Europe, as you said. And
Yeah.
so what's on the horizon? What's the vision for the next, 3 to 5 years? And what are your objectives? And where do you see the pitfalls of your vision or challenges?
Well, the vision is to be able to offer the same trip that we're selling to the British Isles, to Scandinavia, and now Spain, Portugal, and Germany. What we hear from people coming back is that it was the best trip that we've ever had, is the best managed trip. A lot of times we talk to people while they're traveling about things that are coming up and meeting up with drivers. It really is a five-star experience that they get. And from what I hear from travel agents that work with companies like us, they don't get that experience elsewhere. There's people that talk about it, but we're really the only ones delivering it right now. So, you know, our goal by the end of the year is to be able to offer a trip to anywhere in Europe and a trip that matches up with what we offer to Ireland, the UK, and Scandinavia right now. Um, when you land, you're going to have, unless you've decided to rent a car, which some of our clients do, and drive themselves. I don't recommend it in Ireland, by the way. But in other parts of Europe, it's a lot easier, and I can understand that. But if you're not driving yourself, we have someone meet them, the sign out in the waiting area, pick them up, whisk them to their hotel. A guide might meet them later that day or the next day to give them an overview of the city, and then they know where to go back and things to do. And we've already scheduled several things, but some things will be kind of more ad hoc. Dinners are arranged for when they want them. Um, Really, there's not anything that they have to worry about when they land. And what we talk about with our people and with our customers is that we want to offer the same type of trip, the same style of trip, the same level of trip to all those places. And we've got a lot more work to do in Germany and Spain, and then Italy and France are coming up. So we'll have to be staffing up a lot. That'll be challenging, but we've done that before. Coming out of the pandemic, we were very fortunate to be able to get most of our people back. They weren't working before they came to work at Old Sod Travel, so they just went home and did what they were doing before, and they liked what they had experienced enough that they waited around for it to come back. And that allowed us to grow very quickly coming out of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
pandemic.
Nice to have a call option on experienced employees who know the ropes and just, you can expand very quickly. I guess the one thing that comes to mind for me is, um, great expertise in certain countries may not translate. I mean, Europe is very diverse and the
Mhm.
experiences and the customs are different. Do you feel like you can preserve that five-star quality across the geographies in Europe and or just the size that you're going to be now? Getting the people and the same quality of people to be able to generalize it to the whole continent.
Well, one thing we've worked hard at accomplishing is putting some managers in place and giving them the values and the belief systems and the way of doing things that Katrina, who's my business partner, and I insist on. The level of service has to be high. That's what gets us referrals. That's what gets us repeat customers. And even at this fairly young stage of our business, 44% of our business is repeat and referral customers. And the nice thing about that from our perspective is that there are no marketing costs associated, much lower marketing costs associated with it. So it's great business for us, and it's easy business to take care of because they've already experienced us in one place, and are confident that we'll deliver in the new place. Now, can we do that today? No, but I'm very confident that by the end of the year we will, or at least be very close. And then the staffing will be a little lean because you can't grow as quickly as we do without adding people. But obviously the money's got to catch up, and with the different nature of our business that I talked about, because of the lag in funding between someone books a trip and they take the trip, that's challenging. So sometimes we have to visit the Bank of Tom to borrow a little bit of money.
Yeah.
Go through a kind of a low cash flow time.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, as you said, you do get a significant deposit up front, which, you know, pays for that, you know, initial setup of the trip and everything else. But I hadn't thought of the low customer acquisition cost because of the referral nature of your business at an extraordinarily high percentage, you know, 43-44%. That's you know, people would die for that kind of you know, it becomes self-sustaining at a very low marketing budget, and that's another way you're saving on expenses, which is fantastic.
And it also is, I mean, it's almost like a report card on the work you're doing.
Yeah.
Which is nice to be able to hold up in front of your people and just say, this is what good looks like. And, you know, we get a lot of reviews that you know, we've had 180 reviews, and we got one recently that was 3 stars instead of 5 stars, and just everything stopped. We were kind of dumbfounded. We were so used to getting 5-star reviews. It's like, what happened? And it turns out, I think it was just a cranky person, but you still got to pay attention to it.
Yeah, there are a few of those around.
Yes, yes,
especially as we get older, right? So,
that's right.
So
That's right.
Well, that's great. So Tom, you know, I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to get a hold of you and experience the Old Sod travel experience. How do people best get in touch with you and your company?
You can go to our website, and there's a form that you can complete. It's not a long form, but that's probably the easiest. But you're always welcome to get a hold of me. And my phone number is 443-454-1332. And my email address is tom@oldsodtravel.com.
Great. Well, I'm sure when my wife sees this podcast, I'll be signing up the form, and so
Don't blame me for that.
so it sounds like an excellent experience for anybody. So we'll leave it there, and thanks to you for coming on the show, and thanks to our audience for watching. And until next time, we'll see you on the entrepreneur's journey.
Great. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.